Welcome back to Free Founders, where we share actionable lessons from the world's best solopreneurs and small business owners. This is for aspiring entrepreneurs who want proven strategies to go from zero to first sale and onwards to scale and enjoy the freedom that comes along with it. Guest today is Natalie Furness. Natalie is CEO and founder of RevOps Automated. She's also president of the RevOps Research Collective. She's been a solopreneur, was not a huge fan, and she's gone on to successfully scale out that solo business with a team. In this episode, expect to learn 1, how to decide when or if to scale. Secondly, the pros and cons of going solo versus building with a team. And thirdly, some war stories and tactics for getting your product to market. Natalie, welcome to Free Founders.
Thank you for having me, Henry. It's lovely to be here.
Excellent. I want to start with a slightly controversial topic. When I reached out, you immediately said, quote, "I'm not a solopreneur. I'm also not a supporter of the idea of being a solopreneur. I believe in building businesses that distribute wealth." What does building a business that distributes wealth mean to you?
Yeah, I suppose, Henry, maybe I should start by saying I did try the solopreneur thing. I did follow the solopreneur kind of movement, practice kind of building some of my own products, taking them to market. And some of them were doing very well, actually. And I suppose I could have scaled the whole product side and working on my own and automating everything. But do you know what? It felt really lonely. Yes, it was great to have the community on X or Twitter back then and, people I spoke to on LinkedIn and Facebook. But I don't know, it was quite lonely. And actually, I was very interested in building a business that I could be part of, and it could be part of my lifestyle, I suppose. And I sort of realized that not only did I want to have people that I enjoyed working with, I wanted business to be part of my life and part of the culture that I lived in. But actually, when I started working with people and started paying money, I was overwhelmed at the satisfaction of actually paying other people. I didn't quite realize how good that would make me feel. And then I realized actually, if everybody in the world just started up their own solo business, would that be a great contribution to society? Would it not be better if we all focused on building a business that allowed people to work the way that they wanted within that business to help, spread the wealth that we're creating, to help diverse people from diverse cultures find new opportunities and therefore become wealthy because they're supporting you in becoming wealthy? So I don't know, I just got this into my head and just sort of started following this mindset.
How did you think about so hiring the first people? Did you do that from a position of the company has stable revenue and enough to pay myself plus now pay other people? How did you, what was the position you were in with that solo business as you started to scale it?
I think it's quite a tricky thing here as a founder, because I'm not sure for the first few years you ever really pay yourself. You cover your costs. You have to be able to cover your rent or your mortgage or, petrol if you drive, or you just cut back on driving and, walk and cycle, your food. You've got to be able to cover these expenses. But I think as a founder, you've got to be focused on that long term. And actually, I think where we got to with the business is I just got too busy to be able to deliver what people were paying me to deliver. So I had to find a solution to be able to continue to deliver that value to customers without it costing me an arm and a leg, for example. And I think if you actually look at some of the solopreneurs, I know Justin Welsh actually actively talks about having a PA or a virtual assistant and things like that. So, that first hire, even the solopreneurs are doing that. I think it's the hires after that's when things start to change a bit. And to be, fully transparent right now, I'm not sure I'm paying myself a wage right now. We're in year 3. I'm actually focusing on dividends to cover my costs. Eventually I'll need to, pay myself a salary. If I was ever to thinking of, selling the business, I'd need to be able to evidence that in the financials. But, with this long-term mindset, you got to focus on, well, what does the customer need? What skill sets and resources do I need that I can afford And that's just how I've been building it.
It's really interesting because I think, as you say, solopreneurs are really solo, and whether it's interacting with customers a lot and sort of building with them, or freelancers or a PA, some sort of more permanent freelancer, let's say, on the team. There's always someone there. I don't think any solopreneur would ever say, like, it's all on me. I've just worked really hard and pulled myself up by the bootstrap. There are other influences there. I find the contrast really interesting because I think I have been running a company called Product MBA for 4 years, which is like a product management, very hands-on boot camp. And one of the challenges I found was, I think that revenue question of just going, okay, like it's doing pretty well, like I can pay myself quite well. Why? I'm feeling like I'm limiting maybe the growth of the business by not outsourcing things. But then my decision, rightly or wrongly, was simply, it doesn't feel worth the risk. Bringing someone in that's going to be really good in my area would be, 100K, like pounds, I don't know, $130,000 to get someone really good that's going to be able to run bootcamp sessions, right, do all the coaching. And then you've got to go, oh, shit, you need someone to help with sales as well. So that sort of wiped out the 250K revenue of the company. Now, the argument would obviously be, well, that's how you're going to scale it. And by hiring those two people, it would have potentially tripled, quadrupled, 10x, whatever. But I, again, rightly or wrongly, just said, I'm not against growing the team, but it just feels like an unnecessary risk. And why not just ride the wave? Why not? Business is going well. Things are going well. Why risk it? What would you say to me maybe 3 years ago in that situation?
Yeah, and it's great hearing it from your point of view, Henry. Like, that's really great giving me an example that I can talk about. So the first thing I'd say, don't think about salary as an annual thing, because that straight away is going to make you think, shoot, annual, and then you'll look at what you earned last year and you'll compare it to that, and then you'll work out your profit margins based on that. Think about it monthly. Start thinking, okay, let's just say this next hire that I'm going to bring on, they're going to cost me, maybe one will cost $1,000. And my suggestion would be not to outsource sales too quickly. Founders need to own sales for a long time before you start working on that. But my first hire was somebody who I trained to do a lot of stuff on revenue operations, so working on HubSpot. And I'd already come up with a formula of like how to build HubSpot correctly, how to integrate it with Salesforce, how to do all of the things you needed to do. And I documented all of it like really well. And so I was like, well, I think I could teach someone this, not somebody who I'm going to have who is really experienced, someone who's really smart, and someone who is hungry to learn, and someone who I can grow and who can grow with the business. So actually my first hire was a chap I met off Twitter, and he was smart, excited about working with me because of my founder brand, and actually trained him up, started paying him a salary, and now he's my head of implementation. But if you worked out the monthly cost of him versus the monthly additional capacity you have to deliver services, and then focus on, with that extra capacity, how much more revenue capacity you have, so how much revenue can you service, then you start realizing after 3-4 months, you're starting to see a lot more back, which is actually costing you less, because they're not costing you the same as they're costing yourself. Yes, a bit more time initially for the training, but then that's what enables you eventually to be able to step back. And today, I would say I'm very rarely involved in actually face-to-face client work unless they're paying a serious premium for me to be joining in with that account. Yeah, I'll do some mentoring and stuff because I really enjoy supporting founders and new entrepreneurs, but that's freed up my time to be able to then focus on building the go-to-market and sales engine for myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, 100%. I think that's, for me, it's sort of missing that psychological side where unless you're at max capacity, and you basically, sounds like you knew, if I hire this person and obviously you onboard them properly and teach them and there's potential, I'm going to be able to add 30% more capacity. That equals X amount of revenue. I think in my case, it was like, it's ticking along. It's not growing loads, but it's, it was a really comfortable business, just consistently filling out cohorts, 20 people per cohort, paying a premium. Really great for 4 years. I'm still running it. I'm just working a few other things on the side. But so I think for me, it was that question of, until I hit really like, oh, I'm a real bottleneck here, and I can see a very clear equation of free up 20% of Henry's time equals 30% extra revenue. Then, because I never got there, I felt, is it worth, well, firstly, is it worth the stress? Secondly, it felt like a too early an investment, I think. And also looking at startup statistics, biggest killer of startups tends to be scaling too quickly, right? Usually hiring some massive sales team before you have product market fit in some way. So I think there was all these, probably some logical reasons, plus then the fear of, oh, it's the first business I'm able to like really pay myself a decent amount of money. Awesome. Like, I just don't want to mess with that. And I don't, by the way, regret that decision. I just think looking back, I go, Prod MBA could have, and maybe would still in future, could have been a 10x business. But hey, it was also, it was also meant I could go surfing 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. So,
I surf 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. So
yeah, well, that's true. That is also true. There's no limitations when you run your own business.
But one thing I would say to you, Henry, and you haven't, I would say out there, solopreneurs, you're not doing the wrong thing by starting with a solopreneur business. This is not my first business. I failed many times. And the main reason things started to bottleneck was because I didn't release myself early enough to focus on sales. Because what you have to remember is you are the face and you are the brand of your business. If you get bogged down in the day-to-day weeds, the back-end stuff, not the front-facing stuff, and you're waiting for yourself to get capacity, you kind of won't get to capacity because you're not actually focusing on go-to-market and sales. So by releasing your time to double down on your go-to-market, on your sales, on your outreach, on your marketing, on your outbound, on your inbound, on your content creation, by releasing your time to do that, not only will you fill your capacity, but you will fill the other person's capacity. And I think sometimes it's just that like insane belief that you can do it.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point.
It's not it's a calculated risk. And
yeah,
the question is, do you believe you can sell? And I think to a lot of people, that's where the challenge comes, is because, there's a lot of people who building great products and taking them to market who come from a technical background, who don't necessarily have the experience of selling, of doing inbound marketing. And perhaps that's why there isn't that confidence to kind of pay someone to do the back end stuff and then move themselves front end.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think it's not even just time, but focus. I had some time. I had time to enjoy a nice social life and hobbies and things and family. But I think you're right about just being 100% focused on something is just a force multiplier. You're just going to get way better results if I'm, rather than running a boot camp and coaching and doing all the sales stuff, if I'm just doing sales, then I'm just going to get a hell of a lot better at it and, be everywhere at once rather than a couple of places at once. I think it's a really good point. It also brings up an interesting question around, I think the question is like, what do you want to get out of the business? Because that is, we always assume it's sort of purpose plus money plus freedom in some way. But I've found that those three things come in different, the scale is weighted differently depending on the person. Let's talk about earlier, and how did you think about that when starting RevOps, for example? And second question, has that evolved since your first few businesses?
Well, yeah, I mean, it has massive things have massively evolved. I think when I started my first business properly when I was 18, I did have like a little business when I was 8 selling friendship bracelets on the playground. But
every entrepreneur has one of those.
Yeah, but that was my goal was sweets, like that was the goal. And actually, I had a really bad co-founder breakup when I was 8. It was a bad ending. I learned very, very early how, like, I was the salesperson, they were supplier, we had a falling out. Anyway, story for another time. But my second business, I was 18. And it was a dance school, and it started going wrong when I brought in other teachers to teach classes for me. So I learned very quickly what not to do, how not to hire, how, that was an experience. And at the time, I didn't have an end goal there. And I think it was later when I think I was traveling to Ireland one day, and I think this was again in my like teens, maybe 18, 19. And I read a newspaper from the Financial Times, and one of the articles, which still sticks in my head today, is before you start a business, you must first of all think about how you're going to end the business. And I read that, and the kind of differences between, like, are you creating a lifestyle business? Are you creating a generation business? Are you creating a business to grow and sell? Are you creating a business to float on the stock market? And this got me really thinking, and it got me reflecting as well, because my dad has a business, and he went down the he went down the lifestyle business route. And as much as he keeps telling me he's going to retire, he's now like 68. And I think he's still working. He's pretending he's not working, but he is. I think part of me was like, oh, I don't know if I want that. I don't know if I want to be tied to a business forever. So I need to figure out a way of creating true freedom. How do I actually create the freedom of time? Like, what does that actually look like? It's going to take me money, but also time. So I think I was playing around with a lot of ideas while I was working, side hustling like everybody was. And it just so happened that I lost my job pretty much the year before, well, no, maybe 6 months before lockdown started. And I was very kind of stuck in like what I was going to do. So I had no choice but to seriously hustle and start finding a freelance opportunity. At the time in my head, all I was thinking of is I need to pay my mortgage. Like, that was my initial goal. Like, I don't want to lose my house. I don't want to get kicked out. So I started doing freelance gigs, and I was working as like a fractional CMO. I was working fractional RevOps sort of work. I was fixing people's HubSpot and Salesforce. And all of a sudden I started realizing this could scale. It was actually after lockdown that I realized that there was something really there. The first trip.
So you have been freelancing them for a year roughly or so?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, it was freelancing, but I had also started bringing on this person to help me out. The person that I met on Twitter, and we'd started doing things together. And it was, to be honest, it was the moment that I found him that I was like, this is so much fun. Like, I'm working with someone I'm enjoying working with. I'm really loving the work I'm doing. I could do this for the rest of my life if I really wanted to, because it's so much fun. I feel like I found my thing. Now, how do I do more of it? And it was actually, when we got let out of lockdown, the first thing I did was I took a train to Paris, and then I took another train to Amsterdam to go and experience all these places where you can become inspired. And met up with some of my friends that I'd met on X during lockdown, of course, then Twitter. And they were all no-code developers, and I was doing some no-code tools as well and launching those. And it was when I was in like a hotel room, and I remember pacing, and I was like, what am I doing with this business? Like, what is this? I was like, well, I like revenue. I like helping people make more money. I like operations. And I like figuring out like the systems and processes that enable founders to make more money in less time. Like, I love that. So I like revenue, and I like operations. I like revenue, and I like operations. Why don't I just call the business like RevOps? Because like it's two of those words like smushed together. And I literally Googled RevOps because I wanted RevOps.com as the domain name. Because of course, as a founder, the first thing we do is think, let's buy a domain name. Yeah, I am an addict for domain names. But the crazy thing is when I Googled the word RevOps, I looked at the SEO like area and realized I couldn't have that domain name because it was an industry. And it was an industry that was a term that had just come out of Silicon Valley. And I realized that I was on the front of that wave. And I realized that I was in the right place at the right time because no one in the UK was doing it. No one in Europe was doing it. It had been doing in the Salesforce ecosystem, but not necessarily in the HubSpot ecosystem. I believed I was in the right place at the right time. And I wasn't going to miss out on this one because, you know, I heard about Bitcoin very early and did not invest. I did invest in, 2014, 15. I did get in reasonably early, but I heard about it way before that and I missed that. And the thing is, once you've missed a wave, you start looking for them. And I was like, I'm just going to go all in. I'm going to go all in on this revenue operations and I'm going to learn everything there is to learn about that. And I'm going to write a white paper, which I'm going to feature some of the biggest influencers in Silicon Valley in this white paper. I'm going to put up a landing page. I'm going to have a form where people can download this white paper. And I'm going to become the biggest name in Europe in revenue operations, because that way people will want to work with us. And of course, this was a crazy dream. Like, I didn't realize this was actually going to work. And we did it. And it worked. And we started getting a lot of business from the HubSpot ecosystem, the Salesforce ecosystem, not only in the UK, but US as well. People in the US were Googling revenue operations, landing on our website. So some of our first contracts, we were actually delivering services in the US completely remotely, which was acceptable because of lockdown. It did us a favor because we were then able to go global from day one. But then the problem became is that all of a sudden I didn't have enough capacity. So actually, it was a gamble. I spent 3 to 4 months writing, pretty much not earning much money, doing this full go-to-market in the way that I would recommend businesses do a go-to-market. I followed the plan I wished every founder I mentored would follow. And it worked.
I want to pause here before we talk about the sort of scaling journey, because there's a lot to unpick. Firstly, just coming back to that point about the wave is so key. I think you only when you've ridden a wave do you go, oh wow, like that is 80% of why this whole thing worked. Right? For me, it was the product management training wave. Just as COVID hit, so suddenly education goes remote. Suddenly people go, university's a waste of time. Let's go get something a bit more actionable. For you, it's this discovery of this new category, right? And thinking about category ownership, and I'm going to be the RevOps person in Europe. So just to be really clear for listeners, your process there was essentially you start by saying, what do I enjoy doing? And that ultimately sounds like the key factor of success. In fact, in your case, was not I'm a lifestyle business. It's I want to do something that I really am excited about. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And I realize, Henry, I've totally gone off topic from your original
No, it's great.
point.
I think this is all extremely super relevant.
But yes, and I think the advice I would give to founders as well is try stuff. I think that period of actually not having work and freelancing and doing odd jobs, like I also became I think I did like marketing and PR for one of the largest advertisement like agencies in the UK, like Julia, who's like very well known in the ad tech space. I worked for her for a bit. And actually, when I look back at it, I built her event operating system. I was always building operating systems, and I can see that now, but I only know that from trying lots of different things. And I was part of the launch no code cohort when lockdown hit, which is run by Kieran, and I was producing lots of little products and launching them. So I think, yeah, for sure, try lots of things, because you do need to enjoy whatever you're going to spend time scaling. You do need to love.
Yeah, potentially 30 years, 40, right? Your father's case, like his lifetime, right? I completely agree. There's a few really important points there. Yeah, I was fired from a job and it's similar. and this is very common, by the way, for entrepreneurs I've interviewed, and that triggers them to then go start their business. But I think part of it is the time to just zoom out and say, ask questions like, okay, what do I actually enjoy? And the second thing you also mentioned is, even if you don't know what you enjoy, go try stuff, because then you're going to start mapping the terrain and see what you actually like doing. I think it's similar advice I give to anyone that's coming out of school, 18 to 22-ish. Just go work for a startup, because you're just going to get exposure to different areas of business. And then you can go, I really like design, or I really like operations, whatever it is. And then you can sort of go in that direction and build a career there. So asking, what do you actually want from the business? It's COVID as well, by the way, has been a huge. I think it's so important, because there were two sort of groups of people. I freaking hate talking about COVID, but just what a pain it all was. But either people went, oh my God, nothing's happening and the world's ending and I'm not going to do anything. Or they went, oh, there's an opportunity here, because there are shifts in behavior and culture, and there are waves emerging that were not necessarily there. Secondly, I want to just break down from what you talked about. RevOps as a category, you mentioned a couple of things. So for example, Google Trends, looking at this term RevOps, was there anything else, any advice, tips or tactics you would give to others to sort of say, identify a wave, for example?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'd recommend to everybody, do go and download my annual revenue operations report, which you can find on the website, because what we did as a business, and I say we because there was a lot of us working on this, and I'll explain how that happened in a bit, but that was our market research for whether basically I should continue with this business. And I just made it public. So, I mean, I was going to do the research anyway to decide if I wanted to start a business in this sector. But then by making it public, which is very much this idea, this notion of building public, I then was able to share my market research findings. So we sourced our data from many points. I actually worked with a few people that I'd met on Twitter at the time. And I think I agreed to work with a couple of like freelance copywriters, and I had a bit of money that I was willing to kind of offer. I didn't have much, but I wanted to, pay people for some of their time. I did most of the research myself, like scrolling through Google, like pulling, because back then there wasn't that many references to actually use, because it was still an emerging
for RevOps, right? Specifically.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing is that when you're getting something at like kind of as the wave is rising, there won't be too much to analyze. And then I started looking at trends on LinkedIn, and I got a developer friend of mine to kind of like scrape information from the back end of LinkedIn to look at like the job changes over time. So looking at how long people have been in these RevOps jobs, so we could see that it wasn't kind of a long time people have been in these jobs.
Did you pay that developer, or was it just a favor?
Yeah, no, there was some payment attached to that. And actually they ended up working with me for a bit within the business. And actually they've gone on to have an actual career in revenue operations. So it's amazing, like the amount of like these little projects, how they've touched other people and helped them, jumpstart their careers, which I love. And yeah, then I accumulated all of this information and started writing it out, because I think, I don't know, I did a science degree. So we were very taught how to write reports. So I just wrote a report like I would write a science report. But with a marketing twist, having worked some roles within the marketing, I knew it needed to be much easier to read, much more friendly, less words, a few pictures.
Can I ask you about the white paper concept? So, you said 3 to 4 months. Obviously, there's some market research there. It's sort of, testing, seeing, is there a market here? But you could, the counter argument would be, well, you can just, interview 10 target customers and off that bit of Google research and then jump in with the business. Why specifically did you do a white paper when it was such a big upfront commitment? Or was it just first thing that came to mind?
No, I think this is the problem. People think 3 to 4 months is a big commitment. It's not a big commitment. That's like, if you think of the lifetime of your company of 30 years, a 3 to 4 month commitment is a very relatively short time. And I believe in quality. I believe that if you are going to be the business or the brand within a space, you have to do it better than anybody else. Because what is going to, because we didn't have the budget for like paid ads. You know, we were never going to get that. And actually, Henry, we did do interviews as well. We actually combined first party research that we did looking at trends, so SEO trends, LinkedIn trends, all those sorts of trends, with interviews with influencers. Because then when we published it, guess who shared the report? The influencers.
Influencers.
Yeah. So
I think, so the
yeah.
really important point for me there was, but I'm not also going to push that point. There are other experiments you can do, right? Put up a landing page, test it, do some ads, $10 budget. You know, you can do that. That is a path. But I think, as you say, the really key point is, if you want to own a category, become the business in, e.g., RevOps. I think, as you say, you've got to position yourself as like, we own this, like we're the best at this, and there are no shortcuts. You know, you can't be like a slapdash business. You have to show signals of quality. I think I think it's excellent advice.
Also,
excellent example, say, for others.
Yeah, a landing page with a white paper about the topic that you are about to launch a product in. You can do that before you've built a product. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't actually even need to have a product. Like, so if you're doing market research for your product, yes, you're still doing the landing page, but you need the value, the reason for people to download or to fill out a form. So you will see other things like newsletters. Some founders do newsletters. I'm personally, to this day, we don't do any paid at this moment. I think paid works well in e-commerce, and I've seen paid work well for some products, but I'm just don't know.
We've got the lead magnet, right? The sort of the free ebook, white paper, newsletter, free value. Do you find that white paper still pays dividends now? Like, are you still using it? Are you still seeing people interact with it?
I mean, you only have to go onto our website to see that we have a resources page which has free templates for like the HubSpot Salesforce integration. We do a lot of events. All the training like is available there, but you have to sign up to watch the training. Our white paper is still there, an updated version, and we get a lot of downloads. And actually, we've done some analysis of our go-to-market and have found that people who follow me on LinkedIn are 3 times more likely to close 3 times as fast if they enter our pipeline.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's another key lesson there. Is these assets you create beyond, you know, for example, I post on LinkedIn every day, but that disappears within 24 hours. Like, some people will browse through your profile and look at old posts, but pretty rare. So really, the assets that stick around are going to be, you know, your white paper, your resources that you're creating and storing off social media, on your website, that are just going to continue sort of creating value and moving people towards a sale or return sale.
I've got a few examples of people who are doing really well with this, like asset creation. Like there's a chap called the SaaS CFO. His name's Ben, and he does a lot of consulting around CFO work and fractional CFO. I don't know if he does as much live stuff now, but he's got a ridiculous amount of content that you can download or pay to download. And also remember, like, depending on what you're doing, like if you get enough people downloading some of these resources, you can just put a paywall in front of them. There you go, product done. We could have done that. We chose not to. There is also a school of thinking about, if people are interested in demand generation, of ungating everything and then using ads to retarget, which I do agree with, but you do need some budget for that. So that's the sort of thing that we'd be seeing Series B and beyond businesses doing, rather than early stage or bootstrapped founders. I think that's the thing. You have to be resourceful when you're bootstrapped. Like if you do a community project where you're all producing an asset of value and then you're giving it away for free and your name is on the author of that, like it's not just, the thing is with that, is not just the brand of people going, oh, this person wrote this. Like you get invited on podcasts, you get features in newspapers, you get asked to like sign up for awards. Like by creating something of real value to the community that you're trying to sell into, like it does make a massive difference to people wanting to talk to you.
Completely agree. I think that's just good career advice generally. It's like write a short ebook or white paper or something that gives you a lot of credibility. So I found that I wrote my first book 6 years ago, and yeah, that similar thing. I was like, I was gonna. My plan was just to do it for credibility. Like I wasn't expecting to get loads of sales. Got a few hundred, which was nice. But it just opened doors, right? Really opened doors in terms of credibility. Because suddenly, like, you think of yourself as Henry, random person, but well, not random person, but you don't think of yourself as like Henry, the author, but other people see you as an author suddenly, and that gives you all of this credibility. And I think with a white paper, it's even a higher level of author because it's research, right? It has contributors, etc. I think it's, as you say, a really powerful signal of credibility. I want to go back to sorry, Karen.
No, I was going to say we might even be trying to pull each other back to the same thing, because I was thinking about coming back to the point of what my plans are with the business now, as in, like, where is my mind? Because originally all of this sort of evolved very organically, and I was just thinking, well, I need more people to be able to service the revenue. Whereas now I'm in two very different minds. There are two options I have here, which is actually a crossroad that I'm at, which I'm sure there will be founders that are at a similar crossroads of, do I scale to sell the business? Because, in the kind of agency consultancy world, the value of a business right now, we're in 2024, is somewhere between 5 to 8 times EBITDA, which is the kind of earnings before taxation and interest or something like that. I have a CFO who deals with that side, so it's not mine.
It sounds complex. Is that earnings per year?
Yeah, it's basically profit margin. Basically, it's like it's like 5 to 7 times your profit margin before taxation. But it's called EBITDA for anybody who's interested. I've had to learn a lot about that and do a lot of research. So we're looking at structuring the business so that we could sell it.
Sorry, how many people on your team at the moment?
There's now 15 approximately.
15. Okay, wow. So it's gone from you to 15 within 3 years. So what are the next steps? What are the directions you're thinking about?
Well, that's the thing. Like, so before I did the whole 15 thing, I had to think, like, what is my goal? So there's two options here. Either scale to sell. Now that could either be a merger, an acquisition by another company. If we're looking at 5 to 7 times EBITDA, we could get into the realms of, if we are creating, like, if we start generating enough money that our profit margins are somewhere like, 2 million a year, that's like a 14 million exit if we get up the higher, now 14 million, like, that's retirement fund, like, that's pure freedom. Like, I wouldn't be able to do that if I was doing a solopreneur business.
What's your equity stake?
100%.
Still got 100%.
Okay, yeah, 100%. Now, this is because I've bootstrapped up until now. Now, I'm not saying it always become this. And of course, I'm giving the big numbers, so I'm not sure that we'll ever achieve that. I mean, in my head, I'm yes.
Would, beyond obviously the big, nice money figure, what other factors are you thinking about? I think there's really, just also taking a step back. I think just the point that goals evolve. I think, as you say, it's pretty rare that we start. I think because I'm on business number 5 or 6 now. Now with experience, I can say, okay, what kind of business do I want to start, and then see but it's still sort of see where it goes, and my goals will probably evolve. How, and I imagine similar situation for you. So where you are right now, it's scaled, it's profitable, it's exciting. You've got this team there. What are the factors what factors drive your decision when you think, oh, maybe I will sell beyond the money?
Well, this is where there's kind of that like crossroads that I'm talking about. So that's one option. The other option is I keep it going as a cash cow business to enable me to develop my next business. Now, I think I'm one of those just chronic entrepreneurs that whatever happens, I'm going to build another business. And actually, I have a product that's going to be MVP and out in the next 2 weeks. So if you imagine, if your CRM, Google Maps and LinkedIn had a baby and you could actually visualize where your whole entire market was and your route to market on a map, that's what we're building at the minute. So I am already building something else. Now, the question is do I run the two alongside each other and use the consulting business as a cash cow to feed the software business? Or do I look for a strategic acquisition, which would release me further from the business, give me a cash payout, which means I can therefore inject more investment in the next business? But I don't know the answer to this yet. I am exploring conversations in both sides. We are making sure, and if there's one thing, if you are an entrepreneur doing this, do start looking at financial, like things. Google the word management accounts. Start maybe speaking to some fractional CFOs out there, because there are loads. You can, do some like initial consultations, get some advice.
Start just getting the house in order kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's not, you don't have to get everything in order, but start understanding what you're going to need to have done in the next 2 to 3 years' time if you were to go down that route. Because you don't have to be doing that right now, but knowing that that's coming, you can start planning your route to get to that. Like the big thing that influenced me was when I started researching about selling my business, I was looking at PE firms. They won't touch a business, most of them, until they're at 2 million.
Equity, just to be clear.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. PE, private equity. Yeah. When I started looking into private equity, they won't touch a business, most of them, until you've got 2 million EBITDA. So think of that as profits, just to make it simpler. So then I was like, well, if I want to do that, then I have to achieve that. How do I achieve that? I'm not going to be able to do that just by selling my time. That's for sure. I either have to pivot and build a product or scale the consulting.
It's really interesting as well. So on that thread, because it's similar, well, parallel. I won't say similar. I had a conversation with a education venture capital company, must have been 2 years ago, about Pro MBA. I never wanted to do the investment part, but just by getting a pitch deck together and basically going through like, here's the state of the business in a not looking for investment, but here's the state of the business. What do you think about potential here? Was quite a good exercise to do. Obviously, in your case, it's that on steroids, because you're potentially hiring people in. There's big financial implications, but I suppose it's also a really good way to just get, see like what objectively is a healthy business and how can we sort of move towards that. And then it's okay, well, do you want to sell or not when you get to the point where it's sellable, I suppose. What would hold you back from selling? Maybe specifically, I'd be interested in the team. Notoriously companies get acquired and the team will leave and go do something else. Do you think that's just natural? Or is it something you would not want to do?
If I was to sell, I would remain in the business for a good few years. I don't see myself exiting completely if I even was to sell, because for me, beyond the money, beyond all of those, like it being something I love, I genuinely do love my team. Like they have been amazing. I'm also looking, if I was to even consider selling, it needs to go to the right business, because it's still part of you. You need to know that wherever you put your brand, you're going to eventually, if you are to sell, going to announce, especially with a service-based business, it matters if they're all going to fit in, if it's going to be the right culture, if I'm going to enjoy working there, because I would have to be there for the next couple of years anyway. So, and then also, if you look at the turnover of staff generally in consulting firms, it is 2 years anyway. So, I'm sure natural rotation, some people, if we were to do it, would love it, stay there, go up the ranks in whoever acquired us, versus other people would naturally find another role, just like they would if I still owned the business 100%. And I'm not even sure I'm selling 100% at this point. Like, I think it's really interesting the timing that we're having this conversation, because I don't know the answers yet. And I'm comfortable with not knowing. I just therefore need to just keep researching, keep collecting information, because I trust that with all the data, with all the information, I will come to a decision which makes sense for everybody. But give yourself time, be patient with yourself. You don't have to make decisions within 24 hours. You can take months. That's okay.
Well, this is the huge benefit of bootstrapping, is that you're on your timeline. Like, you can do whatever the hell you want with that business. You wanted tomorrow just to like hand it over to some random person, like, you can do it. What, you know what I mean? It is. I think all humans, we get into this mindset of like these narratives of, I have to do this, or I need to do A, B, and C. And as a bootstrap solopreneur, it's always taking us. For me, it was this year, saying, well, I've had this business for 4 years, I've got to carry it on because I've been doing it for 4 years, rather than I can do whatever the hell I want and I can take a step back and carry it on in the background, but build something new as well. But it took a while to have that realization, plus then the getting over the psychological baggage and fear and the, going like, oh God, I'm going to throw myself in some big new challenge. Took a while to sort of, for me, journaling, getting that down on paper, literally looking at it and going, right, January 2024, good time to start something new. And I think, as you say, giving yourself time when you don't have investment pressure, and just realizing that you can choose whichever direction you want to take with it.
Another thing which you've just reminded me of is, because I've built a brand focused on a category, I could just launch many brands under my brand. There is no reason why we couldn't become the RevOps recruiters, or the RevOps freelance places, or the RevOps education. Like, we have this brand that positions us to own a very specific market or be a key player in that market, which means that we could roll out lots of different things. So that's also been on my mind. Could I restructure this company as a holding group and then run out mini businesses under it? But again, I'm not a legal expert. I don't know the answer to that, which is why I've also invested in some fractional legal resources. And if anyone's interested, there's a company called Prism.
Why do you say legal rather than, because I think that as a positioning topic.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
I mean, maybe I'm being super naive, but why do you focus on the legal there?
So, okay. So this is to do with commercial legal structure. So if you were to run all of those businesses from one, all of your budgets from all of them would cross all of them. So you won't be as easily able to tell which is profitable and which is not.
Okay.
If you then decide to sell part of your business, from what I understand, it's not quite the same, because you can't divide up each of them.
All under one business.
Also, policy terms and conditions and regulations. If you are a data processor in one business because you've got a tech company, and you're not in the others because you're doing something completely different, your legal, your insurance structure is completely different, because you are hitting different issues within different businesses. You can't have terms and conditions that cross over your whole company. You need different legal terms. So again, I am not a legal expert myself, but there are pros and cons to structuring businesses in different ways, especially if I wanted to launch a product business and I wanted to give the developers that are on that equity stake within that product. Now, if I only had one business and I gave them an equity stake of the whole business, that's very different to creating a separate commercial fund for that product and giving them a percentage there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I was thinking of more, and I think you actually answered that question of, because you own the category, this RevOps category, you have potential to find different sub problems and create new products and potentially position them as different brands, whether it's within one legal entity or holding company with separate legal entities.
Also, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
If one company goes bankrupt, it doesn't affect the rest of them. So if one fails, you don't end up having to take money from the part of the business that's succeeding. So if you build them in a silo, if that goes bankrupt, it's not so much of an issue.
Yeah. I think, as you say as well, it's a good way just to see, if a company can't stand on its own, there's a problem there, unless you're like Google, where you've got Google search that technically doesn't make money, but then you have obviously the ads business on the side of that. I don't know how they structure, but different products working together towards a higher level strategy. I want to just make sure we also cover go-to-market tips, tactics. You have obviously not only successfully taken RevOps Automated to market, but you sell go-to-market as a service. So you get lots of insights working with all these companies. Any let's talk high-level tips and tactics for entrepreneurs. Like what is working 2024 that other entrepreneurs could put into practice?
Yeah, great question, Henry. And yeah, I suppose I'm in a unique position, or us as a business, we're in a unique position because we sit in businesses' CRMs from pre-seed to Series E. So from a back-end perspective, we can see data-wise what is working and what is not, providing they do their campaign tracking correctly, and hopefully if they're working with us, they are. But to be clear, we don't do the creative side. So we don't write the copy. We don't do marketing as a business. We are a revenue operations function. So our job is to streamline the go-to-market and provide go-to-market expertise and the operations.
Just give me an example of that, like high level, so, what you do with the client.
Yeah, so we would look at all of your channels that go to market. So the typical motions that you may or may not have heard of are you have sales outbound when a one-to-one relationship is going outbound, marketing inbound, in which you are putting messages out and attracting people in. You have performance marketing, which is paid advertising. You have product-led growth, which is when you are putting people to the product, freemium to premium. You also have partner-led growth, which is becoming more popular now, and I can see that that's doing quite well, is when you become a partner. You also have ecosystem-led growth, ELG, which is a relatively new term in 2024, which is where you will start seeing businesses of similar target markets banding together to go out to the market together. So you will have seen, I think, like HubSpot and TikTok have done a collaboration recently to sort of go to market. So you're starting to see these big players within a tech ecosystem working together to acquire the market that they want. And also you'll see like HubSpot has got its ecosystem play. You can develop an app for the HubSpot market, same as the Salesforce ecosystem.
So you're helping what, see an overview of these channels, so, not get down to the granular level.
So the first thing we do is we look at, what are your go-to-market routes, and then how are you operationalizing them? Because you could come to me and say, yeah, Natalie, we are 100% sales outbound. Okay, great. How are you collecting the list? How are you prospecting? How are you operationalizing that? Same with marketers. Marketers are, we're doing inbound marketing. I'm like, okay, great. So you've got these landing pages. What happens after they've gone on the form? Well, we just got them in the CRM. Okay, great. Well, that's lovely. You've got tons of leads, but how are we turning these leads into revenue? So it's once you've captured, same with product-led growth, you've got these freemium users. Which indicators are we using to know what the sales team should reach out to? What metrics are we using? Are those metrics coming back into the back end of your CRM? So our job is really like, yes, you've got these marketing, sales, customer success, partnership teams doing their job really well, but are they creating revenue from their efforts? And our job is to talk about how can you make more revenue with less effort by operationalizing those go-to-market processes. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense.
So there is no business that is doing just one. Multi-channel, all-bound as it's being termed, or omnichannel as it was. If you hear any of these terms, this basically means looking at all the channels around your customer. So it comes down, well, not everything. It comes down to the who. Who are you trying to capture? Where do they live? How can you get to them? And then how do you build trust enough so that they will want to spend with you? So if you're working in the B2C space, the platforms people are focusing on, we're seeing a lot on Instagram, TikTok, depending again on the market, if you're looking more at developers, Reddit, things like that. So it's more looking at the channels around the person.
Can I just ask a question? Why? Because I think that's I don't know, maybe controversial. Many people would say do one channel and do it really well. Why would, let's say if it's product managers, they hang out at LinkedIn plus YouTube. Why be on two versus doing one, really, being the dominant on LinkedIn, for example?
So you can have a dominant and a less dominant, but that's like saying just invest in one stock.
What do you think what's the logic of being on lots of, let's say, where all the channels where your customers hang out?
I suppose I like to think about it like investing in the stock market. Would you invest in one stock for the rest of your life and just put all your money in one basket? Is that smart? Like, that's the way I like to think about it. So you need to diversify, because especially on the non-owned platforms, because you cannot predict when all of a sudden Twitter's going to turn into X and change the way it works. Same thing with LinkedIn.
So it's more about risk mitigation.
It's risk mitigation rather
than what's the word? The occurrence, like being in front of the same person 10 times versus once.
Both. I'd say it's a combination of both. So it's about being everywhere. We know that to convert somebody from seeing your brand to turning into a lead or a customer is gone up. I think people used to say they need to see your brand 8 times in 8 different positions to be converted. Research showing it's more like 15 to 23 now. So it's very, very different. You know, it's hard to get in front of people in the attention space. And for me, it's finding places that other people don't play. We've seen, again, depends on the motions, but sales outbound is working, but only when sales outbound goes out with value. So this is a combination of outbound, inbound approach. When your sales team can go out and say, we've done some valuable research in this space, here's a link to our landing page, then you've got the outbound and the inbound marketing working together. Now, they might use LinkedIn as a channel, Slack as a channel, Telegram, Reddit, like whatever. You're looking at distributing those first-party resources across as many channels that your target market trust.
Got it. I want to make this just, I think it's awesome to hear it's as actionable as possible to sort of specific groups that are going to be listening. Imagine I am an entrepreneur, I've got an idea and I'm launching my business, right? I don't have a product yet. What 1, 2, 3 specific things would you suggest that person does?
Well, first of all, you need to think about your own first party platform, like the journey from there onwards. Start bottom of funnel. You know, like don't start thinking about like what third party platforms I'm going to be playing on. Start thinking about what's going to be the journey from the moment they land on my landing page onwards to revenue. Yeah, because we can think about collecting loads and loads of leads, but if they all get stuck there, then that's revenue blockage, or you'll get revenue leakage because people just fall out the funnel. So think about that experience first. Like, are you storing them on a CRM? If they're on a CRM, are you nurturing them? You know, HubSpot's free. Like, go and get it. Like, have a look at it.
Would you start with a CRM system from day one?
Oh yeah, well, it's free.
No, good. It is time. You've got to set it up.
No, it's really not. I mean, I would say you could probably set up your CRM in like under 3 minutes. Like the free version, it's not going to be all bells and whistles. Why would you do that from
day one? Because I've given advice. I think on one side, I would say the biggest barrier to, specifically for this market, right? Biggest barrier to starting is not going to be, it's going to be faffing around with these kind of tools rather than picking up the phone and calling your target market and pitching them. Just as an example. On the flip side, I think when it's maybe not your first business, like just knowing that you're building your operations properly from day one makes a huge amount of sense. But it can be a little bit of a blocker.
Yeah, everyone is different, aren't they? Like, I've got such a process methodology to doing
you're an operations person.
So I'm probably not the best person to ask. I mean, CRMs to me, I've had a CRM for myself just for most of my life because it's important for me to keep track of the people that I've had in my life. Like, again, so for me, if you're going to go and do outreach, like if you get a CRM and import your contact data, which will happen automatically when you connect your like Gmail and things like that, and you can just import that data, or, most people will be operating off a Notion or a spreadsheet or something. You can just import that quickly. You don't need to worry about the health and making it pretty and wonderful like at day one. I get that. It doesn't need to be perfect. But then even just creating a task list for yourself where you just tick the tasks, it just gives you the structure, because I think it's so easy to scroll. If you're going and if you're like, right, today I'm going to do Twitter DMs, or I'm going to do LinkedIn DMs. Here's my list of people. As I DM, I'm going to tick them off. You stay hyper focused on that. Otherwise, and then you can look back at the end of the day and see all the ticks and say, look, I did 50 contacts today. That was great. That was a productive day. Whereas I think sometimes as a founder, you can find yourself dipping in and out of things and then not actually being as productive as you thought you would be.
You sort of professionalize it in your own mind. I think that's so true. I mean, even now I find myself, I'm like, I'm not, if I go, I want to reach out to maybe 20 people in this market today, unless it's like really methodical, I'm just going to like blast some messages out. I'm not going to do it properly, is my point. I think that's really good advice. I just want to, sorry, Natalie, I think we could go on that thread for a while. It is interesting, but I just want to come back to that question. So founders starting out wanting to sell, let's say, the first product. So you would suggest sort out the basically stop leakage. That means getting your landing page in order. That means having some sort of lead magnet to collect emails, for example. Would there be any one or two other tactics you'd suggest? Second question, I'd love the same question for maybe a company that has some sales and is just starting to scale.
I think for me, it's knowing where people are in their relationship with you. So let's say you've got a couple of forms on a landing page and you're capturing those, and then maybe you're reaching out and, one-to-one emailing them. If you don't want to pay for the automated email stuff, get that. But there's actually quite a lot of automated stuff you can just use for free, like your Zapiers and whatever, like hack stuff together. Like that's totally acceptable at the beginning. Do stuff that is going to give you a bit of technical debt. You will need to fix it, but day one, it's fine. So, automate a bit of this. And I mean, this is the solopreneur way, really, starting at the beginning. And then make sure you have a pipeline to know where people's interactions are with you. Like know who you've had a first conversation with, a third conversation with, who you've had a meeting with, who's actually signed up for your platform, who's your advocates, because only when you know where they are in the journey, and you can build a simple pipeline. Again, you can build one for free on HubSpot, you could build it on Notion, you can build it anywhere, but just knowing where they are. I mean, you could build it on an Excel spreadsheet if you really want. I just find they're just harder to use. I just like stuff that's easy. So that's why I like a CRM. Make sure you've got that, because you won't remember. You just won't remember. And I think I'm also dyslexic and I come from an electronic health records background. So for me, in the medical world, if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. Like that is what I've been brought up with. Like that's been ingrained into me. Like if you do not write it down, it didn't happen. So start keeping records of things and where they are in the journey. And if you've got them on the users, like let's stop talking about users as users. They're people. So like get their name, think about who they are, and start looking at how you can get them to revenue, because that's really the goal, isn't it? There are, of course, some simple tools like you can, pre-sell things. So Typeform, I know there's a few others, Tallyform, Scoreform, things like that, where people can actually pay like straight away for your product before you launch it. If you're launching a product, start getting those kind of like lifetime initial deals out so you can start generating some traction, start getting some pre-sign up, start selling it before it exists. That's really my number one thing, because you don't know if there's really demand in the market for it until people are willing to pay for it. People committing to try it is not people wanting it.
Oh yeah, people saying, yeah, sounds great. I completely agree with that point. Get revenue in to show that you should actually commit to this thing.
So that's stage one. Now, let's say you've got some money coming in and you've been doing everything yourself up until now. You've been doing all the coding, the developing, and the selling. start looking at what you can outsource. Build a process map of your customer journey. I'm a big fan of Lucid Charts, Miro, all of those sorts of things. If you're a developer, you're probably like me and would like Lucid Charts because it allows you to do lots of other ERDs and things like that. So entity relationship diagrams, for anybody who wants to Google that.
I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
No idea what those are.
But then start just changing the color. If it's red, it's really critical. So you're like, this needs a me to do this. Start making the others like blue or green or whatever, and be like, do you know what? I could get a more junior person to maybe do these bits. They're not business critical. They're not necessarily customer facing. And just give it a go. See if that releases up more of your time so then you can focus on the revenue generation, that revenue model. Because I think if you haven't had the time to go and study sales, particularly if you're selling into enterprise, please just go and dedicate a little bit of time understanding sales methodologies, because despite what a lot of people think, there is a science behind selling. Start looking at what processes big businesses use to qualify people, because otherwise you're going to spend your time talking to a lot of people who are going to waste your time. It becomes time. Time becomes your metric as you grow. So how can you save yourself time to focus your time on more things that will generate more revenue? And that might be more channels. It might be some partnerships. I'm seeing partnerships working quite well. Then they are challenging. They're not as easy. There's a long-term play with partnerships because you've got to come up with a win-win solution with people who are happy to refer you and you're happy to refer them. But yeah, just release your time by hiring so then you can spend your more time on things that scale your business.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Perhaps advice I didn't listen to a few years ago. I actually love that visualization because I think it's common to do, say, a customer journey map, right? We map out, okay, where are they coming from, discovering the product, and then going into the product, but not from our perspective as a company, like what are those touch points looking like? What are the activities, the thing, the assets we're creating, etc. Calls we're doing to get them there, and then I think that's really good advice. Zoom in on where you see challenges.
If it's helpful, Henry, I'm happy to give an example to maybe give you a link so people from the community can
that'd be great. I think it'd be really helpful.
See what I mean? Because I think there has been almost an over focus on the customer experience without forgetting you need to focus on your internal operations, and the two have to match. The experience you want to deliver has to match the operations within the business, because what tends to happen is you think just high level at the customer experience, think about that without really thinking about how you operationalize that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I want to wrap up just with a few quickfire questions.
Okay.
First one, what one piece of advice would you give an aspiring entrepreneur to get started?
Just start doing stuff. Just start. Don't stop thinking, because it might not work and that's fine. Just start. I think I probably have built, just in the last 2 years, about 20 brands and 20 different landing pages. And I'm definitely one of GoDaddy's best customers for my sins. And I am addicted to that. Don't buy a domain name, please. Don't get into that. Put up a landing page, put up a form. It's free to do on most places that are all very, very cheap. And start sharing it with people. Just saying would you like to learn more about this? Because you're either going to get some traction or you're not. You do need to give it enough time for traction, though, and you need to look in the right place. You need to think about who and where they live, not where you want to live, where they live. I think those are the main things. Start doing stuff and think about your who.
I think really good advice. I mean, always get started because you'll learn as you go and evolve. But I think, as you say, minimal. Yeah, it's basic. I say basic, but it's just pausing to go okay, where does my group? Where do they hang out? Who makes sense in terms of target market? You don't need to do hours of research. Just stop and think, and then go test it out. Really good advice.
Also, don't be afraid to just ask people for coffee chats. Don't be afraid. I think there's become this notion of like, oh, you have to have something of value to offer somebody before you reach out to them or something like that. I think some of my biggest successes today are just like reaching out to people who are in my target audience and going like, I'm really interested in what you do. I'm working on a few things in the area that you have expertise in. And I would like to share with you some of my thoughts on this in exchange for you sharing some thoughts on this. Would you like to grab a coffee chat? Like, because the more people you know, the more people they know, and then that network effect happens, even as you as a founder for your own personal brand.
Yeah, really good advice as well. Even when you're starting out, you may not even have an idea, go reach out to people, start having those conversations. Really interesting. We could have gone on for about 3 hours, I think, with this. I've got a load of notes. I think it's also even shifted my thinking a lot around sort of sales and scaling, particularly the points around like organizational scale, really interesting. Final thing, any links, calls to action? Where can people follow you? Where can they learn more about RevOps Automated?
Yeah, so I am a bit of a LinkedIn addict for my sins. So you can find me Natalie Furness on LinkedIn. Also, if you are interested in any of the resources that we have, they'll be downloadable for free on our website, www.revopsautomated.com. I think there's a /resources, but you can see the tab there. Don't worry, we're not going to put you into one of our funnels because we actually qualify our leads when they come in. So if you are a small business founder or a solopreneur that is earning a little bit of money, we're probably not going to put you into one of our funnels. But you will be invited to attend some of our events, which I hope will be useful. We try and make everything as free as possible because I'm really keen on building the next generation of entrepreneurs.
Thanks so much, Natty. It was, as I said, really, really interesting episode. I think those resources are going to be really valuable as well for listeners. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you, Henry.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Free Founders. If you enjoyed this episode and want to get each shiny new episode straight to whatever platform you use to listen to your podcast, please subscribe using the subscribe button below. If you're feeling generous, why not share with a friend?